Hi developers, in this video we'll learn how to create the release pipeline for an ASP.NET Core MVC application with a SQL Server database. For the database, we'll be using the DACPack file that was generated during the build pipeline. We'll be deploying this DACPack file into our SQL Azure database so that it will apply the new schema to that database. Hi developers, in this video we'll learn how to create the CD pipeline for a web app and a database project. So we'll be publishing our ASP.NET Core MVC application to a web app on Azure, and also we'll be publishing the changes to our SQL Azure database using the DACPack file. In the previous video here we have created the CI pipelines, which takes the web app and also the database project and builds them in order to generate the deployable files for the web app and also to generate the DACPack file for my web app database. For now we want to create the CD pipeline. For that I'll go to build and release, then select releases. And we'll define a new release definition. Here we'll select the template for deploying Azure App Service deployment because they have an ASP.NET Core web application that they want to deploy. And here I call this environment my production. Then here I start by selecting the artifact which will get the build or the deployable packages from the drop folder that was generated during the build pipeline. So here I keep selected the build option. And then here I need to specify the source for this artifact, which is gonna be the build pipeline that I have already created. Click add. Then here I go back to my production environment where I have a task defined for deploying the web app to Azure. For that we need some parameters here which includes the Azure subscription. So here I need to specify the Azure subscription where I'm deploying my web app, and here I'm using this one right here. So I need to specify the app type, which is here web app. Then I need to specify the name of my app service name. So here I'll go to refresh the list right here. Or actually before doing that, here I need to authorize my VSTS account to connect to my Azure portal. Once I have done that, now I'm authorized to connect to Azure, and I can now go to refresh. Then here I can see the list of all my available web applications that I have created inside my Azure subscription. So here I select the web app with database -MVC, which is the URL for my web app deployed on Azure. So for now our web app knows where to be deployed. It knows the website to go to. It have the web app.zip file which will be deployed, but another configuration we need to make here is updating the connection string that will be used on my Azure portal. So on my local database right here I'm using the local connection string that will connect to my local SQL Server database, and this file also will be uploaded to the web app on Azure. So if I don't update it, then it will try to connect to this local database which doesn't exist. So I need to make this connection string point to the SQL Azure database that I have created in Azure. So how can we connect or how can we update the value of this connection string when my web app is on Azure? So we can do this here using the option here, file transforms and variable substitution options. Here we can use XML files or web config file which exists in ASP.NET applications that are based on .NET framework, not .NET Core. But here, because I'm using .NET Core, so it uses the app settings file that we were looking at here, this one here. So to update values from that file, from that JSON file here, I use this option to say which file I want to change. Here it gives us an example. So it says if I want to change this for the default connection, then I just need to give the path for the file I want to change, and here the name of my path or of my file here is app settings.json. So I'll tell it to look anywhere for a file called app settings.json. Once it finds it, it will try to apply variable substitution for that file. So what I want to change here is the value of this the value of this key for connection strings web app context. How can we access that value? So here again, if we dig in here, then we can see that in order to be able to change this connection string, we need to access this data default connection string, and here it tells us how we can access that value. So because connection string is a child of default connection, then we need to use this structure data.default connection string. So I'll do the same for my app settings file. So I need to create that inside the variables. So here I'll go and create a new variable. What I will call it here, as my file have it, so I'll call it connection strings dot web app context. Connection strings, then dot web app context. And the value of the connection string, it's not going to be this one, this local connection string anymore, but the one that we have created in Azure. So if I go back to my Azure portal where I have created the web app, and because I have linked the database, my SQL Azure database, to that web app, then from connection strings right here, I can see the value of the connection strings right here. So I'll copy it, and here note that it does hide the value for the username and for the password, and I'll paste it right here. Make sure that it goes secret so that not anyone can see my my username and password. So I'll go and change those and hide those changes. Then we'll hit save to save those changes. So now when I try to deploy the web app, before deploying it, it will try to apply this variable substitution. So it will look for a file, call it app settings.json, and it will look for the variables defined right here, which is connection strings.web-app-context, and it will update its value, this one, by the one that I have provided in the value for that variable. So those are all the needed configuration to deploy the web application on Azure. But now, to deploy the database on Azure, or specifically to deploy the DACPack file, then I need to add a new task. For that, I'll go here and select this icon right here and look for DACPack, and here I'll select this task, Azure SQL Database Deployment. I'll add it to my pipeline, and here it needs to get some settings right here. So here it will use the Azure Resource Manager, and then it will need to access my Azure subscription. So So here I select the same one used for my web app application. Then here, in order to be able to connect to that SQL Azure database, it needs the SQL Azure server name. So I can get this value here from my Azure portal. So if I go here to the web app or to the database that I have already created, then from here I can get the server name. So I'll go and copy that value, that name of the server, and paste it here. Then I need the database name. I can get that value also from my Azure portal. If I go here to connection strings, that at that value right here, I can see the name of my database, and I also can see the database connection right here. So I'll copy this value. So this is the name of my database, and I'll paste it right here. Then I need the server admin login. So the login, use it to connect to this database. Then I need to specify the password, but here I don't want to write the password here, because every developer of my team will be able to see that password, and I want to save it in a secure way. For that, I'll be using here variables. So I'll create a new variable right here. I'll call it database password. This is gonna be a secret password. For that, right here, I need to select this icon in order to change the variable type to secret, so that no one can see its real value. And to use that value, I just need to use its name. So I'll copy this one right here and use it in my task right here. So here I can use the annotation $, then the parentheses, and inside of it I'll paste the value for database.password. Then I'll use the action publish in order to publish the DACPack file, and here the type is a DACPack file, but note also that you can use a SQL script. Where it can get that DACPack file, here we need to specify the path to that file. For that, I can go to this icon right here, and this will display the artifacts created in the build pipeline, which here includes the drop folder, which contains the web app, and also the other folder, which includes the build for the database project, in which we have subfolders containing the DACPack file. So here I select the database.dacpack file, hit OK, and that will get the full path to that DACPack. Note here that we have some other additional options for the publish profile, and for specifying other commands for the SQL package, which is used to publish the DACPack file to Azure. And we also have in the firewall, we have this option to specify firewall rules using auto detect, which here will allow the IP address used by VSTS in order to be able to connect to our SQL Azure database. Then it will remove that rule after VSTS finishes publishing the DACPack to Azure. Once we have filled all those required parameters, now we are ready to save the changes and also to create a new release. Here I specify the version of the build, then I click create. Let's open the logs window so that we can see all the console executing our release pipeline. So this pipeline will start by downloading the artifact containing the DACPack and the web app.zip file to deploy the web app. Then start by deploying the zip file to the Azure App Service. Then it will start deploying or publishing the DACPack to the Azure SQL instance. And here the deployment of the release was done successfully. So now we should be able to, and every time you make a change to the database, we will be able to reflect those changes to the database hosted on Azure. So let's try that. But before that, I want to go to enable CI and CD. For that, I'll go back to my build pipeline right here, and I'll go to triggers, and I'll go to enable the continuous integration. Sometimes it's disabled, so here I need to refresh this web page. And then here I can enable this continuous integration. Then here I just hit save, not save and queue, because it will be the build will be queued with a commit coming from GitHub. So GitHub will notify VSTS that it have a new version of the source code. I'll do the same to enable the release, or to enable the CD pipeline. For that, right here, I'll go back to pipeline, then go to this icon right here and change this switch to enabled. We'll save those changes, and we'll go back to Visual Studio, and we'll try here to add a new change in our database and in our web app. Then we'll commit those changes to GitHub to deploy those changes to the SQL Server database. So let's say that here I have a requirement to add a new column to my employee entity. So the employee, for now, it have those properties: ID, department, full name, email, and phone. But here I want to add another column, which will be the address for that employee. So this is going to be an of type varchar and default type of null. We save those changes, and we want to use this change also in the web app. For that, here I'll go to the my web app inside the views and inside the employees folder, which displays and creates the employees. So for displaying the employees, I want to display, in addition to displaying the full name, department, email, and phone, I want to display also the address of my employee. For that, I'll copy this value right here, then here say this is the column for displaying the address. Here I don't find it inside the autocomplete because it's not yet defined in my employee. For that, I'll go and add a new property, call it address right here, which will be mapped to the address column in my database. So make sure you use the same name right here. So coming back right here to my index, I can now access the address. Then I'll display the value of address right here. So I'll copy the HTML element displaying the email, and here I'll display the address. I'll do the same for creating a new employee. So here I'll go and copy this div right here, which is made to specify the phone number, and here I'll say this is gonna be for the address of my employee. So I'll change that here also, then here. So this is the label for the address. and then the input for the address and the validation for that input. Let's save those changes. So now we can test those changes locally by publishing the changes to the database, as we have seen in the previous videos. But here I want to publish those two changes in my web app and in my database to the infrastructure that I have created on Azure. For that, here I just need to go and commit the source code to GitHub, which will trigger the build and release in VSTS, which will update my new web app and the database. So here, let's say I have added a new address column. I'll publish those changes to GitHub. Then GitHub, if I refresh this page right here, should get that the new commit. And if I go here to my build pipeline, which is now a CI pipeline, and I go to summary, I should here see that there is a build in progress. So if I open this build that was triggered by GitHub, once the build was run successfully, here it generated the deckpack file and also the web app. So we can see that in the timeline right here. We can select the drop folder and check that here we have the deployable files for the web app, and also we have the deckpack file created. And when the CI finishes, then that will trigger the CD so that it takes the content of the drop folder to publish it. So here, if I go back to my CD right here, I can go to view releases, and here I can see that I have a new release is being running in progress. So I go and open it, and here I can see the log files. We can see it did deployed the web app to Azure, and it's now deploying the deckpack file to the SQL Azure database in order to apply the new changes. Once the CD finishes running, now I can go to my web app and refresh. And here we have a new column for the address. So let's try to create a new employee. Let's add some address and let's click create. So this should add that address that I have created right here, but it didn't, because right here I forget to make some change to the employee's controller, which is here adding the address to the accepted properties. So I'll save those change, then I'll push again I'll commit and push the change to GitHub so that it will trigger again the CI and CD pipelines. So that triggers a new CI and a new CD. Now if I go back to my web app and check again by creating a new employee, here we could see the value displayed right here, and we can check again by going to SQL Server Object Explorer or to Server Explorer right here, explore the databases, then open our web app with database inside SQL Server Object Explorer. From here, if we go and refresh this value right here, we expand the employee table and see the columns. Here we can see that now the address column was added successfully to that employee table. So if I go here to view data, then I will be able to see this same data inside the web app right here. I'll be able to see it inside this table. So here, if I go to refresh, here I'm able to see all the data coming from my table on SQL Azure, hosted on Azure platform. So what we have done until now is that we have automated the processes for deploying the web app and also deploying the changes that we made to our database. I hope you liked these videos, and if you want to get more about DevOps, then check out my other videos right here to learn more about how to use VSTS with Docker, with a database, and so on. So thank you.